All right, everyone, welcome to the Expat Woman Show. I'm really excited today to bring you my guest, Patricia Brooks, who is an expat empowerment coach. And she's also a speaker at the Expat Woman Summit. Actually, she has a very impressive background, both professional and her expat journey. So, I'm actually going to have you, Patricia, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and also your expat journey, because I think you're in the US right now. You're watching us from I mean, you're joining us from the US, but you live in France,
You live in
right? And
France.
yeah,
Yes.
so go ahead, Patricia. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Yes, I'm Patricia Brooks. As Nyna said, I have been living in the south of France for 6 years now. And I help women who are ready to start the next chapters of their lives find the confidence and courage to move through that fear, that doubt, that uncertainty, so that they can finally stop dreaming about living in their dream country and actually start doing it. And that was my story. I had wanted to live in France for about 3 years, and I was just thinking about it and dreaming about it. And I got to a point where I was like, I need to do something to get unstuck. And I hired a coach to help me move through some of the blocks I had. And within a year's time, I was living in the south of France. And I thought, wow, I can't believe I did this. And because it felt so good, I wanted to help other women do the same thing.
Very cool. And what made you choose France? There's so many countries out there in the world, right? And
Yes.
I think maybe I'm wrong, but I think moving from the US to another country might be fairly easy. Like when I lived in India, coming to the US was not easy, especially actually as a single woman, because their fear is you come to the US and you marry a citizen and then you stay on here, and they unfortunately there is discrimination against people from some countries the US doesn't want us in. But actually, the opposite happened. I came to the US as a single woman and did marry a US citizen. But the guy at the US embassy in India, he asked me. He said, "Do you have any plans to marry anyone in the US?" And I said, "No, I'm coming here to study film, and then I'm going back because I have a job waiting for me." So in my case, I knew I was coming to the US because I had a reason. But so just curious, and I know there are lots of expat women in France. So curious, what made you choose France?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just finished writing a draft of my third book, and I explore this question, why France? Why did I decide on France? And it was the draw initially was the language. I had gone to visit Quebec City, Canada, a couple of times as an adult. It was a child actually, but as an adult, I remember going as a child and they spoke French there, and I thought, well, why not just dust off my high school and college French and speak with the locals? And so I started relearning French, and I fell in love with the French language. And after a couple of trips to Quebec City, I thought, well, maybe I could live in Quebec because it's a very charming city. But then I thought twice about it because the winters are just a little bit too cold for me. So in 2015 was the first year that I decided I was going to visit France to see if perhaps I could see myself living in France and speaking French, becoming fluent in French there. And that's when I said, yeah, France is the country for me. It feels right. Hadn't found the city because I visited Paris and Aix-en-Provence, but those weren't my cities. And the following year, I came back to find Perpignan was where I landed that first year. But for me, the draw was the language. I wanted to speak like the French people speak. And then, of course, France is quite a beautiful country. So,
Yeah, no, actually I studied French in school and early college because we had a choice in India. You either take a local language or you study French. But the beauty of taking French was you started at the basics when you were in like eighth grade or ninth grade. So you were learning simple words, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to take it. But it is a beautiful language, and it's interesting that the language drew you to another country, which makes a lot of sense because you have to find, I guess, something in the country you want to move you that draws you to the country, right? It makes it so much simpler. It is a beautiful language. It's funny, I do have a lot of French expats in the US, So they are from France, but they live in the US, and they always, apologize for their English accent when they speak English with that French accent. I say,
Mhm.
first of all, I tell the women in my network, never apologize for your accent. Own who you are and where you're from, because that makes you unique. But then the French accent is so pretty, in English. It's like, don't apologize. We want to hear you speak. But we're here today to talk about like a really interesting topic. In fact, I posted this question in the Expat Woman Facebook group, and also the Expat Women Summit Facebook group, which you'll be speaking at the summit about how many of you have traveled abroad solo. And I got so many responses, and many women shared not one time, not two times, but some of them have done three times, five times. So, but at the same time, we know there are women, and I'm sure, that's why we chose this topic, and that's why you have this program, because there are women who have self-doubt, who are afraid to move abroad, because they're single. So my question for you is, like, what are some of the biggest challenges that single women face, or think, or maybe even have in their mindset, right, before they move abroad? And did you also face some of those challenges and fears and concerns? Let's start with that question first, Patricia.
Yeah, I think, I moved when I was 51. So I think that the idea that I'm too old,
Mhm.
only people in their 20s, that was a hang up that I had, move abroad, or they study abroad and then they stay. That was the idea I had. And so I thought, 51, that's kind of old to be doing that. So that was something that held me back. But also, figuring out how you're going to support yourself financially is a big concern. And for me, my move was a sabbatical. So I decided I was going to leave my job and figure out the rest later, which is really kind of out of character for me, but I did it. It was just something compelling me to do it. But I think that is a big challenge as well, for because a lot of places it's hard to get a job that will sponsor you. And so I think that is a big challenge. And I know that you and I are going to be having a great conversation on Monday, kind of tackling how you can use LinkedIn to help you to network and get opportunities, find opportunities that will allow you to move abroad.
Yeah, no, that that's a good point. Many people think about the glamour of moving abroad, and they're not thinking practically, like,
Mhm.
how am I going to support myself when I move abroad? What about my job? What about, how much does it cost to live in the country? Because I think that's something else as well, right? That people need to uh, keep in mind, correct?
Yes, yes, and I think there's some people who, like me, who were like, okay, I've got enough in savings. Once I hired the coach who said, well, how much will it take for you to go on a visitor visa for a year? And I came back and I told her, I don't know. She said, well, that's your homework assignment. Find that out. And what I found out was that it was a money block, right? I was afraid to look at what I had saved up to see if I had enough to move abroad, at least for a year, because I was afraid that if I saw what I had and it wasn't enough, then my dream would be dashed forever, which is so unrealistic because, well, if I didn't have enough, I could just save more until I had enough, right? But in my mind, somewhere it was like, that stopped me from looking. And so once I looked and I saw how much I had and that it was enough to cover a couple of years, then I was like, okay. And I did what was required. So I think sometimes it's a money block. I think sometimes it's the not knowing how you're going to support yourself. And then sometimes I think people can get into a bind if they go and, as you say, haven't thought through all the practicalities of supporting yourself abroad.
Yeah, no, very true. And yeah, you were, I can see you were very strategic, and thankfully you had a coach. And I think that's why sometimes people need to hire the coach when they're making these big decisions.
Mhm.
I had another, my previous summit speaker, Lisa Mitchell, on the show, and show, on the Expat Woman show, and she was talking also about creating like emergency funds, so that, because, you think, okay, I have the money to live daily to sustain myself, but also what happens if you get sick, or
Mhm.
if you move maybe with a partner, or you're a single mom, you move with a child, and if there's like an unfortunate circumstance, there's a death, how do you deal with all that? So, this is, hopefully people watching are thinking about all this, because I think more than the mindset is the practicality of, moving abroad. And so in your case, so you went on sabbatical, which was very smart, and you decided to go check it out, which I like, because again, not everyone has that opportunity. Some people, in some people's cases, it's, they just have to do it. But if you
Mhm.
have that, I think it's good if you can go, get a lay of the land and suss it out. But so you moved there, and then what happened? You stayed there. You were going to go for a year, and then how did that change? And then, you're also now living there, I guess, kind of permanently. How did your career transition? How did you start supporting yourself? Were you, and I know some of these are personal questions, so it's up to you. But whatever you can share, I think, will be very helpful, because even I'm really interested in how you did it and what did you do. And especially, as you said, as a single woman, it's you, right? There's no partner
Mhm.
income to fall back on, right? So it's all up to you. So how did you make that happen?
Yeah, so I my intention was to stay here long term, but I wasn't sure, right? I always in the back of my mind I thought, well, if this doesn't work out, I can always go back home. Although I did get rid of all of my furnishings, I did rent out my house for 18 months and then eventually sold it. But so it the my intention was longer term, but I wasn't sure I'd be able to make it work out. Um, and I guess the rest of your question is how, I went on sabbatical, was able to, enjoy myself, kind of figure out my next professional move, which is what I did, what I went to do. I went to become fluent in French, which after the first year, I was not. I went to write my second book, which I did accomplish in that first year. But after that first year, I'm like, yeah, there's more for me here. I need to come back for at least for another year, and I did. And I moved out of the Perpignan, the city that I was in, because I've never lived in a city, so I'm a more suburban or small town girl. And so I found a nice village called Serre that I'm living in now, and that has been wonderful. But 2 years in, I'm starting to think, well, I can't live off of my savings, which had been my emergency fund in the States, forever. I have to figure out what I'm going to do professionally. And I knew that I'd been a project manager for an organization in the States, and I knew that that ship had sailed. I enjoy organizing, putting things together, but I needed something different, and had already been trained as a coach, had gone through coach training in 2015 and 2016. So I had that skill set. And as I said earlier, having made the move to France and seeing myself having success, even though it was hard and I had those doubts, I wanted other women to kind of move through their fears so that they could experience and feel the way that I felt. And so I thought to myself, I need to stand up a business, a coaching practice, to help women who are just like me, who would like to have a community of like-minded women, who, so that they don't feel like they're doing it all by themselves, and have a coach who and a mentor who has done it and can help them through the rough parts. And so I looked into what it would take to start a business in France and get a visa that would allow me to do that. And it was, to me, in my mind, it was pretty straightforward. The requirements were a little bit harder, and I wouldn't say harder, but I had to write a business plan with 3 weeks of 3 years of my financial projections, and go through that visa process. But I was granted that for a year, and to see how I did. You have to earn the French minimum wage in that first year, and then when I renewed, they gave me 4 years on that visa. So that was a load off, because that, while I still needed to hustle so that I could continue to earn, the pressure was off that, oh, next year I won't have to go through this same process. So does that help?
I muted myself because I was drinking water. Yeah, no, that does help. And and you were also talking about you took that step again. You stepped out of your comfort zone, and this is a pattern I'm seeing. You first stepped out of your comfort zone and moved to France, right? And I think I'm frozen, but I'll keep speaking. You were on sabbatical. You moved to France. You checked it out for a few years. You immersed yourself in the culture and the language, and then you decided you wanted to live here. And so then you turned that into your maybe your passion or what you had already studied into business, and then you went through the process of starting the your business. So that no, that is really a very powerful. um, One of the questions I was when I posted about being single in the US, sorry, not in the US, in my Expat Woman Facebook groups about moving abroad single. One of the questions a lot of people said comes up is, what does your husband do, or when will his contract here in this country expire? I was curious, did you get that question a lot? How does a woman address that? Because it can be frustrating, right? When people assume that you can't move to another country by yourself and support yourself.
Yeah, I've never gotten that question, but the question, "Oh, you moved here all by yourself?" does come up, and they look a little surprised. And I think there's that element of maybe even them, sometimes this came from men, even them, they couldn't necessarily see themselves making such a bold move. So I think I don't know how you would handle that question. I think you just need to take a deep breath in and kind of say, okay, they're coming from a different perspective from me, and then set them straight.
Yeah. Am I still frozen on your screen,
You
Patricia?
you are, but I can hear you loud and clear.
This is a problem with StreamYard, and I look at myself, it's like, oh my gosh, and in the worst
It could
possible.
be it could be worse. You could have your mouth wide open, so you're good.
I'm sorry, you have to stare at it. Like, you have my image of you, the frozen image I see is you look great. So
Oh,
that yeah.
good.
So, this is a question I didn't mention to you earlier, but it is Black History Month, and I have a lot of Black expats in my network, and they often say when they move to another country, sometimes maybe, and again, because of the color of your skin, I'm Indian. I mean, I moved to New York and then I moved to the Bay Area. I wouldn't say I've faced any outwardly discrimination, but there are these biases that I'm aware of. Maybe sometimes I assume them. So, just as a single Black woman, do you think you had any additional hurdles and challenges? And I've spoken to Lisa and some of the other women who of color in my network, and they've shared their experiences, both positive, negative. So because that, I think, might be another thing for a woman of color, a Black woman. You know, what is there anything they need to look out for? What about your own experience moving to France? Did you experience any kind of biases or discrimination or prejudice, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so I think that of course, there is unfortunately racism everywhere and discrimination everywhere. I can't say that I have experienced it outright. Now, I'm not saying that I haven't, but the challenge for me was in having come from the United States and grown up in the United States and being taught by my parents of how I needed to be and how I needed to perform or outperform in order to be accepted or get the job or whatever that situation is. That came with me to France, which I didn't have a history with, but in my mind, there's one example. I was at the market one day and I was standing in line to buy flowers, and he helped the person who was ahead of me, and I was up next, and a woman just butt in and got her flowers, and the vendor, allowed it. And I immediately tensed up and said, "Oh," and in my mind, I thought that was racist, right? And I caught myself, this was probably early in my second year, I caught myself saying, "Patricia, yeah, it might very well have been racist, but you don't know that, and you are carrying your energy, that my comportment from the United States. And if I want to have a good experience, I have to not assume that that is the case." And so, as I said, perhaps it was, and perhaps I have experienced discrimination, but I think in not assuming everything is I have a more enjoyable experience.
I love that you share that. Thank you. That's very powerful, because you can make it about yourself and get upset, and then it only upsets you, like whenever, whether it's discrimination or anything, and I get worked up. It's me who doesn't feel good, right? So I think, uh, like you said, maybe don't make assumptions, or just focus on, just doing what you have to do and move on. And so thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to welcome people who are joining us live. If Do let us know in the comments where you're calling in from. If you have any questions for the amazing Patricia Brooks, let us know. If you have anything to add, about being single in another country, or being a single woman of color, or anything that has worked for you, let us know in the comments. So Patricia, so moving on. So now you have this expat, and I might get the term, the name of your accelerator wrong, but you know, is that focus, and you can tell us the name, is that focus on helping single women move abroad, or after they've moved abroad? What is it, and how do you help them, and how long is it? Because that again is very interesting, because I haven't come across too many expat coaches that work specifically with single women who want to move abroad. And I love that you're so niche down.
Yeah. Yes. So it's called the Carefree Expat Incubator Program, and it is for single women who are ready to move abroad. It's you have access to the program for up to 3 years. So the ideal candidate for the program is somebody who is looking to move abroad in the next 6 to 24 months. And so it helps you to prepare yourself, your mindset, to close out your old life administratively, and think and walk through the things you need to set up in your new life administratively before you move. So that's all a part of the online curriculum. But then there's also a group coaching and mentoring component where we meet and we talk about, the lessons in the program. If you're going through it and you're stuck, we coach you through that so that you can complete the program. If you are, if you are struggling to continue to make progress because you're procrastinating, there's accountability in those coaching calls. It's group coaching, so there is an element of support that, you bring up a question in the call and somebody else has had a similar experience. It's not only me that's coaching you through or sharing my experiences, but other women are saying, oh, I experienced something similar to that. And you know what was really helpful? And so there is that encouragement and support of like-minded women. And oftentimes women who want to move abroad alone, they don't have other people in their support network who have a community. They're like, why do you want to move abroad? This is the greatest country in the world. And they don't feel like they're understood. But in my program, they feel like they have community. And so, that's how it works. There's access to the program for 3 years, which means, as I said, if you're joining and you're going to move within the next 2 years, that's perfect, because you work to, prepare your mindset, get your house in order here, get your house in order there. And then once you get there, things might be different than you expect. That was the situation for me. I moved and I did everything I needed to do to get to France. And I didn't think anything about, once I got there, what I would do. And so the first 2 weeks I was on cloud 9, exploring the city. I'm like, oh, I did this, look at me. And that third week, I was like, oh no, Patricia, what have you done? You quit your job. You don't have a job to go to. You don't know anybody here. Was that such a smart thing to do? And for the next 7 or 8, maybe 9 months, I had this tug of war inside of me saying, oh, Patricia, was that so smart? Oh, no, your intuition told you to get here. This is going to work out. And it was hard. It was a balancing act for me. But having access to the program after you move abroad, then you have the support so that you can get on a call and saying, oh, I wasn't expecting this. What should I do in this situation? And then we can talk through it.
That sounds like an amazing program. Thank you for sharing. And you're right, because once that honeymoon is over, right? Especially if you move to a country you really want to move to, and you're exploring, it's like, wow, so fabulous. And then of course after a few weeks it's like, bam, I'm here. Am I in the right place? And as you were very brave to move to a country where you didn't know anyone. I mean, that's more power to you for that, so in terms of moving abroad when you're single, I mean, even if you have a partner, but I think especially for single women, because there's always that safety aspect for us. You know, two questions. One is, do you know which are the safest countries in the world? A couple of them for single women who want to
Mm-hmm.
move abroad. And
Yeah.
uh,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Okay, and the second question was, what are some things women could do either before they moved abroad or when they move abroad to ensure that, to ensure their safety? And, especially, I just want to add one more thing because to these questions, because especially, from certain cultures, like even the Indian culture, maybe some of the Asian, Middle Eastern cultures, single women may be frowned upon for moving abroad if they're not married, right? I know many Indian women, like, they're like, you're moving abroad to study, but you don't have a husband, or it may not be safe. And, so there's two things, right? The reputation and the safety. I know I added a lot more to the question, but just in terms of safety and, how can women ensure that they stay safe abroad? Do you have anything to add to that or
Yeah,
respond?
I think this is a good question because I work with women in North America, mostly, primarily. I work with any single woman, but primarily that's my client base right now. And there is a lot of fear here in the United States because of just the violence that happens on a daily basis. And so there is that element of going someplace and being concerned, well, is it safe? And so that, while that wasn't my, my one of my reasons for moving, France is a pretty safe country. I don't have a list of the top safest countries. I know Portugal, I think, is on the list, but I think that as somebody who's considering making a move abroad, and if safety is an issue, it's definitely something to research. I think there's a lot of information out there, and it's also important to work to realize that you may be experiencing or hyper focused on the safety element and thinking that other places aren't safe because where you're coming from might not feel safe to you. And working through that, on a, with a coach or even a therapist, because, post-traumatic stress is real. And I think that you can go to a safer country and still not feel safe because of what you've been through. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's really powerful because you come from a fear. Because, in India, there are safe places and they're not such safe places. So I grew up always being very wary and cautious. And I find I've brought that with me to the US. I mean, the US, I mean, even in my neighborhood, it's a nice residential neighborhood, but we have trails, and I'm always have my ear, like paying attention to who's behind, who's in front. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
again, the US, as you say, is not, there are lots of places which are not safe. There's been lots of crimes
Mm-hmm.
against women. It's interesting. I too have heard that Portugal is like on the top, countries for, single women to move abroad. So thank you for sharing that. So we just have a few minutes left. So I want, I always like to ask my guests based on our topic, what is one tip that women who are single, who are looking to move abroad, or who have already moved abroad, what can they implement to, move abroad confidently or live confidently in the country they moved abroad? And also, when you talk about sustainably, how can they also make it sustainable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that those are good questions. So the basis, I think, a big key to making a move abroad and making it making a move abroad confidently has to do with knowing your why, knowing why it is that you're going to turn your life upside down, right? Why you're going to start from scratch, because that's what you're doing. I didn't see it that way when I did it, but when I was, after week 2, I realized, oh, Patricia, you know what? You're starting over again at 51. This is hard. but why? For me, I had that deeper why. I needed to be in France. My intuition told me to be there, but also I had the goal of becoming fluent in French and writing that second book. So I had some really good reasons, and that propelled me forward. That helped me to get to France, but it also helped me to swat away that 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 doubt that I had, that doubt that came up. And so I think that confidence comes from knowing why you're doing something, and it helps you to move through the hard times, even when they're pretty hard. So I think knowing your why is a key to moving abroad confidently. Now, sustainably is making a plan, right? Having a safety net, as you talk about, having that emergency fund was huge for me, because I didn't feel the stress, even though it was in my mind because of money blocks, right? There's like, oh, I'm going to run out of money, when I had more than enough to sustain me for the time I needed to sustain myself on that. But I think having that safety net helps to make sure that it's sustainable. Some of the women in my program are standing up businesses, and so it's not necessarily going to happen overnight that you're going to be making what you can live on. And so having savings to support you in as you get that up and running is vital.
Wonderful. No, that's, I mean, I think that's the most important thing. Also having that why, because just like when I teach people how to use LinkedIn, I say, don't treat it like you're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something will stick.
Mhm.
Anything you do, and the more intentional you are about it and you have a plan, I think the more successful you'll be. And I think you also mentioned earlier, things might not always work out right initially when you move abroad. There'll be hurdles and challenges, and even down the road. But when you have that why, it helps you move forward and look at the end goal, which in your case was initially to study French, and now of course it is running a sustainable business where you're helping other expat women from your own experiences and the
Mhm.
challenge you had. So that is really valuable and very powerful. So we are at the end of the session.
Mhm.
Patricia, I'd love for you to share with people how they can connect with you. If you have any offers or anything, where can they find you? Go ahead.
Yes, so you can visit my website, thecouragecatalyst.com, and you can learn more about my program if you are interested. If you have decided that you are ready to make a move abroad and you feel a little bit stuck to make it happen, you're uncertain of what the next steps are, or what the next steps are, but fear has got you stuck, then go ahead and go to thecouragecatalyst.com/future expat, schedule a complimentary discovery call with me, and we can talk through where you are, what country you want to move to, what things might be holding you back, and if our working together can help you get there more easily and more joyfully. So that's that.
Lovely. If I was moving abroad, Patricia, I would definitely, and I was single, I'd definitely connect with you. You just have
Yeah.
this, I don't know, this energy and this joy and this, passion for, living in another country. So I'm
Yeah.
sure people
Thank
watching
you.
this would want to connect with us. And I'm also excited to have you join us as a speaker for the Expat Woman Summit,
Mhm.
which is happening from March 6th to March 8th. Patricia is one of 20 incredible speakers from countries across the globe. We have people from France, from Pakistan, India, not India, Dubai, the various parts of Europe, the US, of course. And so it's going to be amazing. And the focus is on Inspire Inclusion, which is the top theme for International Women's Day this year. And it's focused on belonging, community, and empowerment abroad. And Patricia, you'll be talking about how not to feel like an outsider when you move abroad, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so
Absolutely.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so
I'm
excited
excited
to
to
be I'm excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
yeah, no, I'm so glad our paths cross, and your topic today and the one you'll be sharing at the presentation will really help women who are contemplating moving abroad or who have moved abroad and feel like they're a second class citizen or seen as that foreigner. So thank you, and thank you for everyone who's joined us live or who'll watch the replay. Patricia may also share the links in the comments of the various platforms we streamed on, and I will share the link to the Expat Woman Summit. I'll just quickly say you can register for free. The presentations are available for 24 hours after they go live. So it's theexpatwoman.com/summit. And we'll see you there. Thank you so much, Patricia.
Oh, thank you for having
Bye.
me. This has been a pleasure.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. Bye.